I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
Welcome to a very special new series on the James Altucher Show. Today we start off with a very special episode. It's part of a series of episodes I did with my good friend AJ Jacobs. You've heard AJ on here so many times. He wrote Drop Dead Healthy, The Know-It-All, where he read the Encyclopedia Britannica from A to Z. He wrote The Year of Living Biblically. He wrote a ton of books, and he has a new upcoming book about puzzles that we'll have him on. But now we have a new series of episodes that we did together. The theme of these episodes, good or bad. Every episode will take on a big topic and try to figure out if it's good for the world or if it's bad for the world. Like, for instance, monogamy, good or bad? Or DNA tests, or gambling, or whatever. You'll see all the things we have.
Right, or the Olympics, or this is AJ talking, by the way. Cars and kids. I have kids. I love my kids, but you know, they're downsides, and
There are downsides.
They're downsides. They hope they're not listening. The point of the podcast of these specials is that everything has costs and benefits and pros and cons, upsides and downsides, and we need to be thinking more about the nuances instead of an absolute this is terrible or this is good. No, it's complicated. They're grays.
You know, it's such a good point, AJ, because when you go on Twitter or Facebook now, you get kind of corralled into these opinion ghettos. It's like black and white. Everybody's on one side or everybody's on the other side. Immigration's the worst thing ever, or immigration is the best thing ever. So, but the world is filled with grays, filled with nuances and subtleties, and adults or even kids used to be educated about this, but now it's like, if you believe in one thing, you have to believe in the next 50 things in your particular group, or else you're canceled. So I want a world with grays, and that's the only way we're going to actually find solutions when we see the complexity of life.
Totally, I agree. And it's interesting because I try to apply that thinking to everything. So we should apply it to ourselves, because there are pros and cons to doing a podcast episode on pros and cons. Like, I do believe that the good or bad has good and bad. And I can tell you the pros are what we talked about. Everything, like, it's a love letter to nuances and thinking through things in a complex way. But then there's the bad side, I think, there's something, you ever hear of both sidism? People say,
No.
This is when you have a news report about, say, evolution, and they feel compelled to say, well, there is the other side. Let's talk to some creationists. And that I don't like. I don't like both sidism because I think it's fake. It's sort of a fake pro and con, and you're having these false equivalencies because they're ignoring science. And I think what we want to do is we want to follow the science, whatever it says. So if the science says here are the pros and here are the cons, that's what we're going to do. And also, we're interested in solutions, like you said. So when we look at the pros and cons of things, we want to say, how can we fix those cons?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really interesting because there's a fine line. Like the idea of science, for instance, is to be skeptical. I mean, all new science replaces the old science. So, when what's his name? The guy who figured out that washing hands and germ theory actually cures diseases in the 1800s.
Oh, there were a couple, Lister and Semmelweis.
Semmelweis, yeah.
I love that guy.
And he was put in a mental asylum for thinking this. And
he died. I think he died of an infection too, which is the ultimate horrible irony.
I know, and nobody listened to him. So the whole thing is you want to know not everything is proven science or proven theory, particularly when you get into more social sciences like economics or psychology. The more we know, the less we know is what we figure out. But so it is good to respect the nuances. And so, look, AJ, how about, I think the first episode should be about gambling, good or bad, and then people could tell us if they like this sub-series.
Yeah, we hope that the good of this outweighs the bad. But yeah, let's talk gambling.
Excellent. AJ, have you ever gambled?
I have.
You spent time in a casino?
Yep, not a lot, but some.
What did you gamble on?
Blackjack. And I tried a little of everything. I sucked at everything.
Well, okay, blackjack, what else?
Craps, slot machine, baccarat was too complicated, so not that.
So let me just say, I almost think what you did shouldn't be called gambling, but should be called, and I don't mean offense by this, but should be called stupidity. You're not stupid, but the problem is all the games you just mentioned, it's not gambling because there's a guarantee that over time you will lose more than you win on all of those games. The only game in a casino where you have a chance to win is poker, which is why for decades until the rise of poker TV, poker wasn't encouraged. Poker was hardly played in any casinos, actually. But blackjack, the odds are best case, 49 point whatever percent. It's not 50%. Craps is much worse. Baccarat, that's the fact that James Bond plays that shows how stupid he is. Baccarat's the worst game. The only game that might be worse in a casino than baccarat is what's it called? Pai Gow, the Chinese style of poker that has horrible odds, and yet people play it constantly. So it's not really gambling when you actually know the outcome, which is that you don't have a chance, except in that one moment where you're taking a risk. So I guess you could say in that one moment where it feels like gambling, you could say that's a gamble, but the odds are against you.
And I love that James Bond is an idiot. I mean, maybe though, is it glamorous? That's how he gets his Bond girls by playing. It sounds fancier than if he were at the slot machine, that would just be sad.
Right. So, but the only way to measure, let's say gambling, I would argue gambling is betting on an outcome that's unknown.
Yes.
But the skill of a gambling should have some skill in it, so that a skilled gambler wins more than wins more than an unskilled gambler, and a skilled gambler should end up net positive in the long run. So, yes, a skilled blackjack player will win more than an unskilled blackjack player, but over time, both will lose money, making it kind of a useless endeavor.
Right.
Now, I'll just tell you one. Can I tell you one thing about blackjack, though?
Heck yeah.
So there was this guy, Ed Thorpe, who in the 1960s, he developed the math behind card counting. So he figured out if you kept track of the tens, jacks, queens, kings, and aces in the deck, and you made your decisions accordingly. So you bet it would inform you on whether to bet high, whether to bet low, and so on. Like if you were looking for a 10 and you knew most of the tens had already been dealt out, then you would bet lower. If you knew that most of the tens hadn't been dealt out, you would bet higher. And he ended up being a net winner in blackjack, and they started kicking him out of casinos because he was winning too much. And so then he built, because of the math he developed, and this is in the 1960s, he built the first wearable computer. He built a computer, I believe he had fit it on inside his pants near his feet, and then had a wire going up to his ear that would basically, he would tap his feet whenever like a king or a queen or a jack came up, and then like an earpiece would inform him when it was safe to bet big, when it was not safe to bet big, and so on. Now, using that experience, eventually he stopped playing blackjack. He used the same ideas to move into the investing in the stock markets, and he created one of the most successful hedge funds in history. There was a book about him, or by him actually. It's a great book about investing and gambling. I think it was called A Man for All Markets, and I forget the name of his book on blackjack, but it was the seminal book on blackjack for decades.
So gambling made him an innovator. Like it helps with.
Gambling was a safe way for him to try out different ideas in money management, math, computing, and then ultimately in investing.
Right.
And you could argue the same things happened in back in the 1700s or 1600s. The whole reason the entire field of probability and statistics was developed was to help gamblers. And
right.
Many of those initial statisticians moved from gambling into insurance. Because if you think about it, what is insurance? Like, let's take life insurance as an example. You pay, let's say, I'm just going to make a number up. Let's say you pay $2,000 a month to get $1 million of life insurance, so that when you die, your beneficiary gets $1 million. You're making a bet that actually that you're going to die pretty quickly so that you only pay $1,000 and you die a month later, and that your beneficiary gets $1 million right away. The insurance company is making the bet that you're not going to die until you give them well north of $1 million in value. So 100% of the insurance industry is basically a series of bets. It's called insurance. It's called annuities. They have all these fancy names for different types of insurance policies. Like there was something called viaticals, where people who were diagnosed with AIDS would sell off their life insurance. All of these things are fancy words for bets. And the people who took the bets usually had very complicated mathematical models to take all of the risk out of the equation. If they made a large series of bets, they knew they would not have risk.
Got it. Let me just say one thing about the card counting, because to me, that is the craziest part of a casino, is that you're not allowed to card count. Because it's not like you're cheating. You're just playing the game well. You're not using X-ray glasses. You're just using math and probabilities to make the best move. So banning it, to me, is like saying you can play chess, but you can't think 4 moves ahead. You can only think 2 moves ahead.
Well, that's a great point. And casinos, their point is, we don't care. We're allowed to refuse service.
Yeah.
So they'll just kick out people. But the other thing is, they might encourage they sell books on card counting now, because the average person is not, first off, they've changed the way they shuffle the decks. They've changed the way they vary how the cards are dealt. So it's become almost impossible it's actually become impossible for an individual to count cards. So they're happy. If you walk in there and say, hey, I'm going to count cards, they'll say, go right up to the most expensive table if you want, sir. Free drinks, because they know you're going to probably fail and lose more money than you win by card counting. But where it gets interesting is now they're famously, as documented by Ben Mesrick, in the movie 21, and I forgot the book that he wrote that it was based on, but groups of very smart people could card count and work in collusion with each other, and it's harder for casinos to track that that's happening, and that's a little bit more of the fight that the casino is battling right now.
Let's back up and talk about this is good or bad, as we know, and gambling is the topic. Is it a scourge on society, or is it a wonderful way to entertain yourself?
And I wouldn't say, though, correct me for this, when we're looking at the goods and the bads, I wouldn't say the good is only related to entertainment, but I would say the bad, yes, you can argue, is it a scourge? Is it a net negative on society versus
Right.
being a good on society?
Well, let's dive into the good, and you touched on this before, but to me, the number one good thing that gambling does is it teaches you how to think.
Yes. But what do you mean specifically by that?
Well, I think you had on your podcast, you had Annie Duke, the professional poker player.
Yeah, I've had Annie Duke, Maria Konnikova, who has now turned into a semi-professional on poker. I've had on many investors, so if you count that, it's gambling. But you know what? For the sake of this, let's just say gambling, games, and sports betting, the traditional things we think of as gambling is gambling. I think the good, or the industries that are created out of gambling, like insurance and the stock markets and the commodities markets and so on, which actually fuel society and innovation and prosperity, and that's all based on these fundamentals in gambling. But let's say, for this sake, that gambling is just what you would play in a casino, or games of chance where there's some luck involved, or what's called proposition bets, where, I might bet you like, so-and-so is going to be president in 2020.
Right. And I think Annie Duke and Marie, is it Marie Konnikova?
Yeah.
I love their books because the thesis is that poker can make you a better decision maker. And poker is like life. It's a game of incomplete information and luck. And that we should think in our life like poker players. We should think in probabilities. We should, and I try to do this. It drives my wife crazy because she'll be like, when are you going to be home? Well, there's a 60% chance I'll be home at 3 o'clock. There's a 20% chance I'll be home at 4 o'clock. But it's a better way to live because you are able to take into account that life is not certain. It's not black and white, and you can plan for all these probabilities.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting to understand that not every decision is a 1 or a 0, that there's a gray area in the middle. And that includes in almost every type of decision making you could make. Should a child go to college in today's day and age? There's no clear answer. Like, there's a huge ongoing national debate about this right now. And I would say there's no clear answer, and you have to be comfortable with the gray area. And playing a game like poker almost lets you practice living in that gray area, that area of not knowing. I don't know your cards until you turn them over. So I have to keep calm and make the best decisions I can make, given what I know about you, given I know about how you've bet so far, given the cards in my hand, given the probabilities that the cards I want will show up, and given those statistics, how much money I could potentially win, and also managing my money. So if I have a small stack of money, I'll make different decisions than if I have a large stack of money. So there's lots of aspects of decision making that happen in a single hand of poker.
Yeah. And it's the thesis of our podcast, is that nothing is certain. Everything it has shades of gray. So we're very much in the same mindset as poker players.
Yeah. And can I tell you, so I one time had this very weird period in my life where I had just sold a company. This was 1998. And I started playing poker. I played poker literally for 365 straight days. I played in this several places. I played in this club downtown called the Mayfair Club on 26th Street. I played in the Diamond Club on, I think it was on 21st Street. I played in Atlantic City. I even had a house in Atlantic City. I would go down there and play every weekend. And then went to Las Vegas on my birthday. I played there. I played in Las Vegas a bunch of times. So I played 365 straight nights in a row from 8 p.m. to 4 in the morning every single night. And
that was like your full-time job?
yeah, I was obsessed with it. I read every book. This was in 1998, 1999. So
Did you play Tobey Maguire?
I did not play Tobey Maguire, but I played many people who were later on like world champions of poker and so on. And there wasn't as many. It wasn't as popular then because it got popular when there was the kind of the hand camera on underneath the tables, and it became popular on ESPN watching poker, but it wasn't yet on TV. And so I'd get a hold of these VHS tapes and try to study the best players. There wasn't as many books. There was maybe 20 decent books on poker, maybe less. I read every book I could on poker, and I just played every day. And I talked to players better than me every single day just to learn. And I would say for 6 months, I lost money. And then for 6 months, I made money. So it's probably overall it was a net break even, but I think I learned how to be pretty good by the end, at least enough to know the fundamentals at a better than amateur level. And it was fascinating because, by the way, it's not just about when you say, oh, there's a thing in probabilities, there's a 60% chance I'll be home by this time, but 40% not. There's a flip side to that, which is that in poker, let's say there's a 100% chance you could win a hand, but you only win $1, but you have to bet $100 to win the $1, may not be such a good bet. A lot of times you'll make a bet where the odds are against you, but if you win much more.
High risk, high reward.
Yeah. So for instance, let's say you have a 33% chance of making your hand. So people who know Texas Hold'em, if I'm just going to get in the weeds for a second, if the flop comes out and you need one more card for a flush, you have a 1 in 3 chance of making your flush in the hand. Now, the only reason you would bet, though, is if you have more than 3 times the amount you could win than what you're betting. You should make that bet all the time. Even though the odds are still you're going to lose, if you consistently make that bet, then over time, you will make more money than you lose. You'll make net amount of money, even though the odds are always against you on every individual bet. So thinking like that too, in terms of what you could win, what's the expected value of a situation? That happens in investing too. You don't want to, you want to take into account what's the upside, what's the downside, and what are the odds of winning either side.
So do you think that year of playing poker was an overall good thing or a bad thing?
I think it was an overall good thing for me. And I wish I had continued it actually, because first off, I had worked so hard building up and selling this company. I was just like stressed out of my mind for years and years and years. And then suddenly every night I would go and the doors would open at 8 p.m. and I'd go into this, underground, and there's like 3 sets of locked doors you had to get through and video cameras everywhere because it was illegal in New York. And you go into this room and you sit around a table with 8 other people. And I had this weird camaraderie that I never had before. Everyone's just, for the whole night, everyone's just joking around and insulting each other in funny ways. And I had never had that before, kind of like just a group of friends making fun of each other, which I always aspired to have that in a weird way. And even though the game itself is we're all actually lying to each other and trying to steal money from each other, these became my friends for a year, for better or for worse. It's not the best set of friends to have, but it was the only time in my life that I had this kind of weird camaraderie that had nothing to do with my work life.
I'm your friend.
I know,
your friend,
but here we've been friends for a long time. But and this is what I like about my life now is I work with all of my friends. Like we're doing this podcast together. It's not like we're in the coal mines together. We're having a fun time doing a podcast. Like it's fun to do things with your friends,
right?
But this time playing poker was the only time I really separated out work and play. And it did teach me so much about. I learned so much, and I worked hard at it. I learned so much about probability, statistics, money management, which didn't help me later on, unfortunately, decision making. But here's why I wished I continued with it. Somebody at one point told me, why are you playing poker every night? You could be starting a new company and making a lot of money. And that was really the beginning of the end for me. Like, I started new companies. I started investing in companies instead of winning or losing $1,000 or $2,000 a night. I started investing huge amounts of money when I didn't yet have any of the skills needed to be a good investor. I wasn't really taking my skills from poker into investing, which I should have. And I didn't start doing that until much later. And if I had stayed playing poker in like 1988, 1999, by the time TV poker became popular in the mid 00s, like 2005, 2006, I would have had my 10,000 hours in. I would have been a much better poker player. And I was already good when I stopped, but I would have been much better 5 years later when it was popular on ESPN. And I think that would have been a better career choice than repeatedly losing all of my money over and over again.
So you want to be in an alternate universe where you stayed as a poker and you were like Phil Ivey?
Yeah,
that's a better life.
If now I could have all the other good things in my life, plus I would have stayed with it, then that would have been. I love games, and that was a poker versus chess, backgammon, Go. I think poker is the most interesting because of the high element of chance, even versus backgammon, which has an element of chance, and the high element of psychology, the more interesting role statistics and probability play. I think poker is the best game in the world.
That's it. So you would, because I would not like to be playing poker for like 10 hours a day. That would just make me want to, like,
and it's really boring because this is unlike what you see in the movies when you see poker. Most hands should not be played. Like, you're basically, if you're playing poker accurately in a full table of people, like let's say 8 or 9 people, you should play one hand an hour maybe.
That is really interesting. Well, you touched on two of the good. I thought we would start with the goods, and you basically touched on the two of the big ones that I thought of, which is it teaches you how to think, and it's fun. You got camaraderie out of it. And to me, if you go into a casino saying that it's sort of like going to a Broadway show, you're going to lose $100 or whatever your budget is, but you're doing it for fun. You're going to meet. That's okay.
That's not a bet, because let's put it in the terminology of a bet. You're betting $100 that you're going to have a good time. Mm-hmm. But if you like musicals in general, and you like the story of Hamilton, and you've heard from many people that Hamilton's the best musical ever, you've mitigated the risk of your bet, so it's not much of a bet.
Right. I love that. And I think it depends on the game you're playing. Like poker, you can kibitz with the other players. Like slot machines, to me, it's like someone sitting in front of a slot machine for 8 hours is the most depressing thing in the world.
It just seems that, like, when you go, two things depress me when I go to Atlantic City is when you see all of the old people, particularly old people for some reason, just sitting at slot machines for hours at a time by themselves. And then the other thing, particularly at like 4 a.m, when you see the huge line at the ATM machine, that's very depressing.
That is the definition of depressing. Well, it's interesting you say that, because I looked up to see if gambling is overall fun or not for most people. And there was a Yale study from 2004, and it's just one study, but it said that with older adults, so 65 and older, moderate gambling is associated with better health, which is crazy. But the possible reasons include increased activity, socialization, like you were talking about, and cognitive stimulation. The huge caveat is that for this, only older adults. For younger people, it's linked to high rates of alcoholism, depression, bankruptcy, and incarceration, which are not fun.
Right.
Not fun.
Which, by the way, I saw at the poker clubs I would play at. The younger people viewed it as, hey, this is maybe a way I can make a living. And it's very hard, particularly when you're the first year or two, you're learning it. And depending on how good you are at learning something, you might not make a living. You might lose a lot of money, which is now you have to make more money to try to get better at poker so you could make a living at it. Like, somehow poker's been glamorized as a way to make money and make a living, but very few people could do it. And particularly it's so competitive now, it's very hard to do it. Also, you're not moving around as a younger person. A younger person needs to move around more. You're not moving around that much. An older person is moving around. Plus, an older person has the maturity and hopefully the bankroll in the bank. They can play without as much stress. So the focus is on the camaraderie and the cognitive stimulation. One thing about the cognitive stimulation that I left out is whenever you make a poker bet, again, you're trying to reduce the risk as much as possible. Just like when I bet on I'm going to have a good time at the musical Hamilton. When I make a bet at poker, I want to make sure my bet has the right odds. So I mentioned before, what's the expected upside if my bet works out and figuring that in with the probabilities. But there's another thing too. You get really good at analyzing the people around you. Like, what if I see that every time AJ gets dealt two really good cards, he puts his hand over his mouth? And you start to notice things about other people. You start to notice how they move when they're excited as opposed to when they're pretending or bluffing or whatever. So you learn, you really learn insights into people and how to think about people as well.
So yeah, you learn probability and psychology. Like, what were the tells? Like, what are real tells? Like, I've seen them in movies.
The first real tell is not like in the movies where if someone like breaks an Oreo cookie, that means they have a great hand. The first real tell is if you see how aggressively someone bets. You could think, are they bluffing or they have a real hand? But over time, you learn their aggression when they're bluffing is slightly different than their aggression when they have a good hand.
Like what?
They might move a little faster. They might bet a little bit higher. Still almost seems equally aggressive, but there's just their behavior slightly changes. And then you could sometimes know exactly what hand they have and you get out. Or you can see that they're bluffing. If they just hesitate for a second, some people, now the good players will hesitate for a second on purpose to make you think they're bluffing when they're not. But some players, and then you get to know that as well.
Did you have a fake tell?
I don't know. I think I have to be careful about putting my hand on my mouth or leaning forward when I have a good hand. Like, it's as if I'm suddenly taking the hand seriously, as if I'm not taking the hand seriously at all. Or sometimes I have to not act too blasé when I have a really good hand.
But now, are you like playing a game where you're telling people that if you put your hand over your mouth, you have a good hand, so now you can use that when you're bluffing?
But potentially, I remember one time I was playing, and there was a really good player who would always play at this club, the Mayfair Club, and he once told me I had a tell, and I said, "Can you tell me what my tell is?" And he said, "For $1,000, I'll tell you what your tell is." And I considered it because, first off, we were making or losing that much every hour, and it could have been worth it. But everything has a price at the poker. It wasn't unreasonable for him to ask that. Like, nobody's going to be generous.
That's hilarious
in that sense. And I learned a lot from this guy, how to kind of dominate the table psychologically so that everybody defers to you to sort of set the tone of the table. And, kind of dominating the table psychologically is also important so people don't want to bet against you. And there's lots of things you learn about psychology, probability. So in that sense, and again, by the way, those are skills that are useful in investing, in insurance, in many industries. Like, if I buy this cheaper quality cloth, will I still sell as many clothes? Everything's a bet ultimately.
Right.
In life, and poker is kind of this microcosm world where you could safely practice all these skills.
I love that.
As long as you don't take it too seriously, because I did see alcoholics, I did see people with gambling addiction, I saw people who lost their jobs as like lawyers and other kinds of professionals because they just got too addicted to poker.
Right.
They'd get depressed when they had a losing streak. You're always going to have a losing streak, and you have to. That's another great thing you learn in gambling is how to handle the inevitable losing streak, because it's a game of chance. No matter how good you are, you're going to have a losing streak.
And how did you handle it?
You have to kind of the clever way is when you win to tell yourself not to have good emotions, so that this way when you lose, you won't have bad emotions.
Like, it's almost like stoicism.
Yeah. Kind of, but the sad matter is when you lose, it does feel a lot worse than the goodness it feels when you win, which is why people get addicted. It's kind of like the loss aversion cognitive bias.
Well, that's why I don't particularly love gambling. Is for me, the pain of losing $100 outweighs the joy of winning $100.
Yeah, that's always going to be true, unfortunately.
But then why do people get addicted to gambling?
Because when you win, and if you win enough, if you have those days where you have a good winning streak and you win big and you start to feel the elements. Remember, it's not 100% chance. If it's 100% chance, then it's just stupid. If you have those days where you sense, oh, I have a little bit of skill and the other person is less skilled and now I'm winning, you start to think, oh, this, instead of going to my 9-to-5 cubicle job, I could just do whatever I want during the day and play this gambling game at night and become a millionaire. So I've known people who've played games of chance who made millions or tens of millions. Can I tell you one story?
Yeah, I love stories.
So I had this
Although
friend,
we know they have problems.
I have this friend, Falafel. His name's Falafel. That's
real
what we
name?
called him. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, it's not his real name. But if you Google Falafel, you'll actually find him when I describe the story. We used to play I moved to New York City in 1994, but even before then, whenever I visited the city, I'd go to Washington Square Park and play chess. And Falafel was this homeless guy who literally I think he slept on the ground, like he had leaves all over and dirt and stuff like that. And we would play chess and we would gamble on chess. It's not a huge gambling game. We gamble for $1 or $2 a game, which was all that I could afford to gamble at that time. And then at one point, he disappeared for like 6 months. And everybody's like, where's Falafel? Where's Falafel? And when he kind of came back into the scene, apparently he had, in that 6 months, miraculously, seriously studied the game of backgammon and won in this huge game against all these Wall Street guys a bankroll of about $600,000 in a 6-month period. And so suddenly he had this. He was no longer a Falafel. We called him Falafel because he was so poor and homeless, and he wasn't a very good chess player. Somebody would always have to go at lunchtime and get him a falafel sandwich. He only liked falafel sandwiches, so we called him Falafel. And then he got this huge bankroll. He went to Las Vegas. From what I hear, he lost it all betting on sports.
Oof.
Then he went to this huge game in Iceland, won it all back and then some. Now he lives in Israel, still playing backgammon and running a bunch of poker rooms in Israel. But he is the best player in the world of backgammon right now, as ranked by his move. The way he plays is most correlated with how a computer plays. And a computer plays backgammon much better than humans. Falafel is the human closest to how computers play. And he ended up making millions from backgammon. I don't know if he was ever the world champion, but he was the best in the world. There's documentaries about him now. I used to play this guy every day when he was homeless in the park. And I know several stories like that. Like gamblers, that kind of gambling personality either dies in obscurity and alcoholism and depression or becomes a falafel.
Did you ever play him in backgammon?
He always wanted to. I would never play him in backgammon. I did play very good play. I did myself study backgammon for a while and got pretty good, just like I got pretty good at poker, but I never got to that level.
Well, I know you play Stephen Dubner in backgammon.
Yeah, so Stephen
and
I are like right now we're in a huge match. We started playing before he wrote Freakonomics. We started playing in 2002 or 2003. We've been playing this ongoing match since then, and we're almost pretty much dead even at this point.
Like, what's the score?
I think we're like 5 matches to 5 matches, something like that. It's
Wait,
like
you've only played 5 matches?
Well, we're playing
in
each
17?
one up to 101 points, and sometimes we don't get together that frequently, depending on what we're each doing.
So you've played hundreds of matches, but only...
Hundreds of games. But, you know, it worked out to be about 10 matches so far.
That's hilarious. Because, backgammon, I just don't think of as... I think of it as a kid's game, but I guess not.
So in my building that I live in now, is a former world backgammon champion who switched to poker when poker got more exciting. Poker is more of a game. Backgammon's a gambling game because of the dice and the gambling cube, the doubling cube. Poker though, there's more element of chance, and so a skilled gambler will do better in poker than in backgammon even. And this guy Eric Seidel switched from being the world backgammon champion to probably the highest cash winner, I mean, probably tens of millions or more in poker, and he teaches. He's the one who gives lessons to our friend Maria Konnikova, who's now a semi-professional poker player.
I'm doing this project, this book, and for it, I had to study this painting by Hieronymus Bosch, the Garden of Earthly Delights, and it has this depiction of hell that is so disturbing. It's like, he was on acid, and it seems like, there are these demons fornicating, and there are a bunch of people playing backgammon. Like, it's hilarious. Like, this is the most evil thing: backgammon and fornicating.
Yeah, because if you ever play backgammon and you're winning, the game looks like it's so easy, you're winning, and then just at the right point, he makes the one roll that there was a 1 out of 36 chance he would make, and you're crushed, and you've just gambled everything on the game because you were so 1 out of 36 chance. How is he ever going to make that roll? And it just happens, and that truly does feel like hell.
So it's accurate. Can I tell you my one sad gambling story?
Yes.
Because I have not had a gambling life like you, but I did in college. I wanted to bet on the Kentucky Derby. So I was in Rhode Island, but they had OTB, like off-track betting. So my friend and I called information, which you could do back then, and we got the phone number and call OTB, and the guy's like, "Oh yeah, come down. The race is about to start. You got to come down right now." So we get in the car, we speed down there, we pull up, and it's a mattress store called Off Track Betting with 2 D's. So the guy was just being a dick, and like.
So you didn't bet on the Kentucky Derby?
No, and we didn't buy a mattress either. It was just such a sad. So that was.
Did you ever bet on a horse?
I have bet. I have been to the racetrack a couple of times. I can't. I'm terrible. Why, are you a horse bettor?
No, I've never bet on a horse in my life. But there are hedge funds, investors who basically they have software where they load up all the data of every horse and how they do against every other horse, and how they do, whether there's muddy conditions or dry conditions or what the temperature is. So they get as much data about every horse as possible. And then given a new race with a bunch of horses and new weather conditions and so on, they run it through their software, and the software makes a prediction which horse will win. And these hedge funds that have done this have actually been very successful and have made a lot of money. So you could do this with sports betting. You could do this with horse racing. If you have software on your side, just like Ed Thorpe with counting cards and blackjack, if you have software on your side, and with sports betting, it's legal to have software on your side, you could make a lot of money.
Right. Actually, I read about that. Did you ever read the book Everybody Lies?
No.
Oh, this
Who
guy,
wrote that?
you should get him on your podcast. I'm having lunch with him tomorrow, but I forget his name.
Wait. I think I met him by accident in a cafe. Look up his name. I'm pretty
All
sure I
right.
met him, and I told him I wanted to have him on my podcast, and
You
I never.
should. He's
circled back.
fantastic. Yes, that's the man.
What's his name?
Seth Stevens Davidovitz. And
Yeah. I literally met him in the Housing Works bookstore cafe on Colby Street, downtown. And we started talking, and his book was about to come out. And I said, "Oh, you have to come on my podcast. This sounds fascinating." And I never did. So tell me.
highly recommend him. I think he'd be a great guest. And it's all about how big data can, it's all about big data and how to use it to manipulate people. And one of the chapters is about this guy who used big data in racetrack, in horse gambling. And he tried to find every data point for all the horses he could, had thousands of data points. He finally found a correlation between the size of the horse's left ventricle in its heart and how well it did. And it was such a close correlation that it turned out that he could make millions. And he started this company, and he's like a gazillionaire.
Yeah. So again, big data is a kind of gambling, right? Because how do you find patterns in the data that nobody else found before? Now you have an information advantage. You could use that information advantage to make a bet.
Right.
That encourages innovation in big data.
Right. There you go. All right. So we are still ostensibly on the good parts of gambling. So we've got teaches you how to think, encourages innovation. It's good for camaraderie. And another one I want to add is it could save the world.
Tell me.
All right. It's a little bit of an overstatement there, but you know about prediction markets.
Yes.
right? So these are basically you're gambling on current events. Like, is North Korea going to continue making bombs? Is China going to raise tariffs? And they could be long term, they could be short term, but they're almost like stock markets for current events.
And I like how we're not using the word. We're not using any gambling terminology. It almost sounds like a stock market, right?
Right.
Like prediction markets. Making predictions about current events. What's the odds that North Korea is going to invade or send a bomb to South Korea? But the reality is, it's just betting.
It's just betting because it's putting money on an uncertain event, which
Right.
is the definition of gambling.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy.
The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
Like, what's an example of something that, other than elections, because there's been a lot of prediction markets about elections, but what's another example of something that you might find in a prediction market?
All sorts of things. It could be, when are we going to go below 50% for fossil fuels, for instance? It could be, when is the next pandemic coming? It could be something like that. And I don't know if you've had him on your podcast, Philip Tetlock. Do you know Philip?
I know he is. I've not had him on.
Fantastic. Love that guy. He wrote the book Super Forecasters. And he talked about how to become better at predicting the future. And there are a lot of interesting heuristics, but one of them is put money on it. Like, when people put money on their predictions, they do more research, they're more thoughtful about it. And these prediction markets, if you get the right group of super forecasters, they are generally better than alleged lifetime experts in China affairs. They're better at predicting what's going to happen. So his argument is politicians should pay attention to these prediction markets like this, instead of getting a bunch of old men who have studied this all their lives. Look at the prediction market, and that will tell you what to happen, and then you can act on that.
Well, it's interesting because this is kind of a debate that occasionally happens in journalism. Let's say you have a journalist who's writing about Apple, and what's the next iPhone going to look like. Who's going to have more knowledge, the journalist or an investor who, let's say, has invested $1 million in Apple stock? The person who's invested $1 million in Apple stock has probably done a lot more research, a lot more work, has looked for every clue of what the next iPhone will look like. Whereas the journalist is just going to, it's easy for him to write an article and say, oh, it's probably going to have, a microphone on both sides, cameras on both sides, because he has no, this is Nassim Taleb has the phrase for this, skin in the game. If you don't have skin in the game, you're going to, meaning
he's going to get paid either way.
Right.
If he's wrong.
So if you don't have skin in the game, you only have upside, and if you're wrong, you have no downside. But skin in the game means your reward and your punishment is equal to your ability to analyze the situation. So a great example might be, let's say we each bet each other, like, I'll bet you $100 you do 1,000 push-ups a day for the next 30 days, and you say yes. Now you have skin in the game to be healthier.
Right.
So this is even beyond prediction markets, but just like individual. Like, if you always have skin in the game with everything you can do to make yourself healthier, a dollar amount is probably a better metric than any other amount, because it's, we all understand it. Then that's, making bets like that can improve your health very directly.
Gambling can make you healthier. I love it. Can we do this right now? Like, because if we say it on the air, I can't pull out. Like, what I want to gamble on my health.
Okay, how about we each do $100 in a month, that every day for the next month we do 100 push-ups a day.
100, okay.
Doesn't have to be 100 push-ups in a row, but just throughout a 24-hour period, you've done every 24-hour period for the next month. You and I both do $100.
I'm in. Now I usually do push-ups on my bathroom sink because you don't have to go as low. Is that okay?
No, it has to be.
What about 200?
It has to be flat on the
bathroom
floor,
sink?
and it has to be 2 inches, no more than 2 inches between your nose and the floor. And it has to be a hard floor.
I hate going down.
And your
to the
back
floor.
has to be straight.
All right. I'm in. I think this will be fun.
All right, I trust you.
All
I don't.
right.
If you don't trust me, Robin will keep track.
I don't trust you, and I am installing a camera in your house.
And the ideal situation is that neither of us will lose money. We'll each give each other $100.
There you go. All right, so I have one other positive for gambling, which is that it's an excellent way for governments to raise money. And this has a long history. France and England had lotteries to raise money in the 16th century. And this is my favorite. Alexander Hamilton wanted to do this thing that's a lottery mixed with insurance. So it's called a tontine, and everyone puts in money, and then the last person surviving gets the most money. So it's like a really dark death pool, but you win if you survive.
And the government maybe takes a fee off that to organize it?
It's like lottery. The government takes a
Is
cut.
Is it illegal to do that? Like, why don't people do that now? Like for instance, why don't you start a business doing that? That sounds like a great idea.
All right, I'm in. I don't know. I'd have to look up whether it's illegal or not. I mean, there are
Hold on, I'm gonna look it
incentives.
up.
There are incentives to kill the other people. So it's not like a
Yes, but maybe there's other kinds of tontines, like I don't know. Let's see, tontine, is that how it's spelled?
Tontine. It's a French word.
An annuity shared by subscribers to a loan or common fund increases as you have more subscribers, and the last survivor enjoys the whole income. So is it illegal?
I like this. This is another good business idea.
It is illegal. Let me see.
Not if Alexander Hamilton
Over 100
has it.
years ago, it was legal. And at their peak around the turn of the century, tontines represented nearly 2/3 of the American insurance market, holding about 7.5% of all national wealth. 9 million tontine policies active in 1905 when there were only 18 million households. The tontines became so popular that historians credit them for single-handedly underwriting the ascendance of the American insurance industry. But a spectacular set of scandals wiped it out. I'm curious what those scandals are. It doesn't quite say. And the longer you live, the larger your profits, but you're profiting off of people's deaths. And so somehow or other, I guess if I keep reading, I'll realize that they're illegal. But I think they're illegal. But I don't know. There might be some way around that. If it was legal, I would certainly consider that as a viable business to start.
All right, let's do a startup. Let's go to Silicon Valley. Tontine, an app.
I wonder if you could do it like an offshore company that does it.
I love it. All right, I'm in. Yeah, I mean it's patriotic. Alexander Hamilton wanted to do it, but he also wanted child labor. So
you know how you can do it though is you can do it as a massive set of life, and everybody takes out a life insurance policy where the beneficiary is constantly changed to every time someone dies to be the remaining people until and it only pays off when the second to last person dies.
Done. I love it.
So we'll figure this out.
All right, we'll
Let's get a
figure it
lawyer.
out. And I'm going to live longer because I'm going to do more push-ups than you.
Probably.
So,
And I'm older than you. Am I older than you? How old are you?
no, I'm like 2 months older than you. I was born in March 1968. When are
I
you?
was born in January. I'm 2 months older than you.
Oh, you
So
are.
I'm probably
All
gonna
right.
die first.
So I'm definitely.
Odds are I'm going to die first.
So yeah, it's an excellent way for governments to raise money. The United States raised, the states raised the states raised $85 billion from lotteries, which hopefully went to fund police, parks, education. We'll talk about later. It's got a huge downside, the regressive tax element, but overall lotteries are very efficient. They're efficient way to raise money.
You know what I love about buying a lottery ticket?
What?
I've bought plenty of lottery tickets in my lifetime, and I don't think I've ever actually looked to see if I won or lost. Because when I spent $1 to buy a lottery ticket, just for $1, for the next couple hours, I get to dream, what if I win? And I'm basically paying for the dream. I know I'm probably not going to win. I don't even check to see if I win or lost. I just assume I lose, but I get to pay for that dream.
That's lovely.
Yes.
There you go. So it is. That's more proof gambling is good because you get that joy. You get the 2 hours of joy.
If we stop right here, gambling is the greatest thing to hit culture, society, everything.
Exactly.
We're buying tickets to Hamilton. We're getting smarter. We're becoming millionaires.
Oh,
we're
it's
getting
wonderful.
healthier. And then we're going to get rich before we die.
It is a beautiful thing. Let's just cut it off.
And the government will get wealthy.
Well, yes, you're right. We should talk about the bad because there are just a few bad things about it. I mean, we can start since we're on lotteries. I mean, they are terrible. This guy I know named Derek Thompson, who's a great journalist, he wrote a piece for The Atlantic that's called "Lotteries: America's $70 billion Shame." First of all, Americans spend more money on lotteries than on books, video games, tickets to movies, and sporting events combined. That's crazy
Wow.
talk.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
And the problem is the people who buy the most lottery tickets, the sales rise with the poverty level. So if the poorer people buy more lottery tickets, because wealthy people play lotteries for fun, like you. You know, it's a fun thing. But low-income people play it as a prayer against poverty. So it's hugely unfair. It's hugely regressive.
Yeah, I guess I can't argue with that. I think lotteries are really bad. I think most gambling is regressive because, like, again, most games in a casino, we focused on poker earlier, but games like blackjack, baccarat, like all the games you play, are mostly played by, they take slot machines. You rarely see like a billionaire going up to a slot machine, but you do see lots of poor people playing slot machines, and net they're going to lose money. If they play all night, they're going to lose money. They'll seem for a long time like they're breaking even, but they're going to lose money.
Well, can I tell you, there's a great book on just this called Addiction by Design by a anthropologist named Natasha Dow Schul. And it's all about the slot machines and it's all about how evil slot machines are and how they are designed to keep your addiction going. They give out just enough money so that you get that intermittent reward. And they think about the lights, the sounds. They test the sounds to make sure they're like the most pleasing sounds. The chair they make as comfortable as possible. People wear adult diapers because they just want to sit in front of these slot machines to get that dopamine fix. And the way they do it, it's very brilliant. Nowadays, they have like 100 lines and you can win. So you pay $1. You're going to win on some of those lines. It may just be 3 lines and you get 3 cents, but you're always going to win every time you play the slot machine.
What do you mean they have hundreds of lines?
Well, when slot machines started, you just had that one line. And if you got 3 cherries, you win. Now they're video and there are 100 lines that you can win. And some of them are diagonal. So every time you play, every time you pull that lever, you are going to win, but you're going to win less than what you put in. But your brain doesn't know that. Your brain is like, oh, I'm winning. So you're slowly losing money over time, but you feel like you're winning.
How often will you win more than the dollar?
Oh, apparently very rarely. But you're getting that dopamine fix, so you don't care.
Right. That's so interesting.
Oh, it's
so they're
horrible.
basically playing exactly on just the neurochemicals for addiction.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like cocaine is attaches itself to the dopamine receptors to kind of trigger that dopamine, and that's why people get addicted to it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing happening.
I mean, it is truly evil. It's like if I don't know, I'm trying to think, if the vodka industry somehow like got an IV into people's arms and just shot it in there every hour.
But it's related because when you're sitting there at a slot machine in a casino, most casinos give alcohol for free. And so you could also, this is, a lot of gambling is related to alcoholism and other addictions because you're just drinking all day for free. You're sitting there gambling all day. All these addictions are related to each other. Nevada, prostitution's legal. So I don't know of any other state where it's legal, but Nevada is the biggest gambling state in the United States.
You told me about Foxwood. What was that?
Oh yeah, so I used to be involved with a mental health facility that helped alcoholics, and it was right next to Foxwoods. So if you want to build a mental health facility that treats addictions, it's not such a bad idea to put it right next to a casino.
So because the people from the casino would come to the facility, or the other way?
Eventually, addicts can't. Eventually, every addict hits bottom at some point and has to be treated. You can't just drink alcohol all the time and not come to a point where you say to yourself, "That's too much."
Right.
Or unless you die, because you're just going to keep going lower and lower and lower if it's an addiction.
Right.
And there's health aspects of being an alcoholic. You get the shakes and so on, and you have to drink more and more until you can't even physically drink enough if you're enough of an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And there's a Gamblers Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Debtors Anonymous, and all these things are connected.
Right. It's definitely, physically an addiction. I think it is in the DM. Well, shit. What's the name of that thing called? DSM. Yeah, it's in
Is
the
it in DSM addiction?
Oh yeah, it's officially been moved into the gambling addiction is an official addiction.
And the other thing is, we mentioned earlier, a positive was the camaraderie. Like for me, I was like always so happy to be around this group of people that I could joke around with and have fun and so on. But at the same time, like I mentioned, you do realize they're while we're all joking around, we're all lying to each other and trying to take each other's money, which is not necessarily aspects of friendship. And there's that saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend your time with. I could pretty much guarantee that if you're the average of the 5 people you spend your time with and you spend most of your day gambling, probably not going to turn out so well. Because most of the gamblers I know, even the ones who are successful gamblers, they are not the best people in their lives. In general, you want to be with people who are trying to improve their lives, not people who are making unqualified bets and losing money and being addicted to things, because gambling is so related to addiction. So while I think there's these net positives about thinking, about having skin in the game, about learning psychology, probability, and so on, and even some aspects of camaraderie, and it's the game-like features are fun. You mentioned the negative effects on society, which is both the regressive tax of something like a lottery. There's also the addiction possibilities, which are rampant. Like there's a great book I encourage people to read. It's a novel, Bob the Gambler, by Frederick Bartlemy, which is an excellent book about a guy who slips into more and more of a gambling addiction. It's kind of a horror story at the end. But that said, like you mentioned with prediction markets, and like we were talking about with the skin in the game, gambling is the underpinnings of all of these stock markets, all of the commodity markets, all of the insurance markets. So many things are gambling. So practicing the elements of gambling in a safe setting, like let's say poker or backgammon or the bet we just made about push-ups, is a reasonable way to get better at other areas of life, as long as you consciously make that translation. Like I did not consciously make the translation at the skills I learned from poker to investing, at least initially, and I was a very poor investor in the beginning as a result. It was only when I brought in these things I learned from poker that I started to get better at these other aspects of my life.
So how did you use your poker skills in investing?
Two ways. Really three ways, but let's say the most important thing is risk management. So in every kind of gambling where you have a chance to win, like poker, how would you manage your risk? There's many ways to manage your risk. One is if you have a great hand, you can feel confident about investing a little bit more. If you have a bad hand, you invest a little bit less unless you think you have a chance of bluffing. So that's one way to take out risk, is you only bet when the odds are on your side. Another way to take out risk is understanding the people around you. If they all are clearly broadcasting that they're bluffing, and you know they're not so good, so that your read on them is correct, you could feel more. Again, you're taking risk out, so you could bet more. Another way to take risk out is to just in general not invest a lot. So to understand, there's a saying in poker: you should always have 100 bets in front of you. So make sure you have enough money in front of you that you can make 100 bets, and don't bet the house on something where you only have a 60% chance of winning. If you do that, eventually, pretty quickly, you're going to lose the whole house. So everything is about mitigating risk. So in investing, how do you mitigate risk? Well, let's say one way I can do it is, let's say I'm considering investing in a company, and I see Warren Buffett, the best investor in the world, also just invested in that company. One way I mitigate risk is I say to myself, well, Warren Buffett is clearly a far superior investor to me. If it's good enough for him, it's not like I'm going to run into him at a party and say, Warren, how could you have been so stupid to invest in that company? I would never do that because he knows what he's doing. He's got 1 billion people who've probably researched it for him. So I could invest knowing I've mitigated the risk a little bit. I could also mitigate risk by reducing the amount I invest, no matter how high my confidence level is. I don't want to bet the house on something that isn't 100. Nothing's 100% chance. So you always want to keep your investments really small and diversify. That's another way to mitigate risk, is diversify. You always want to make, as they say in poker, you always want to make sure you stay in the game. And it's the same thing with investing. You always want to keep your investments small enough that they don't stress out your future thinking, and that you get to stay in the game. And also there's the psychology of it. Like, let's say I'm investing in a private company. I get to look at the founders of the company. Do I think that they have the characteristics of someone who's going to build a successful company and sell it? So there's kind of analyzing psychologically the same way you might do around a poker table. Then there's other characters. Let's say you're investing in a drug. The drug has a certain probability of passing the FDA trials that every drug needs to pass. So that's purely a gamble, because there's a chance, no matter how good the drug is, there's a chance the FDA just might say no for some obscure reason that you have no clue why. So you have to understand, well, who are the scientists who are making this drug? Did they have prior success rate with another drug? Who are the investors backing this? Have they backed other successful drugs that have gone through the FDA? How is the FDA viewed passing drugs for this particular disease? Is this disease on their critical list that they fast track drugs, and so on? So risk mitigation is the most important thing I learned. And this is true for entrepreneurship also. People think entrepreneurs and investors take risks. It's actually the exact opposite. They mitigate risks. So for instance, let's take our bet about push-ups. If I just said to you, AJ, I want you to do 100 push-ups over the next month, and you said yes, you may do the push-ups, but you may not. But if I say I'll give you $100 if you do, I actually think there's a higher probability that you'll do the push-ups. So I've mitigated the risk that you're not going to do the push-ups by having skin in the game, by offering money. I mean, the other way we could have done it is you give me $100 if you don't do maybe that's the way we should structure it, is you give me $100
I like that.
if you don't do the push-ups, and I'll give you $100 if I don't do the push-ups. But that's how we mitigate the risk, is by having skin in the game. So what I learned from poker is that entrepreneurs and investors don't take risks, which is the common mythology of entrepreneurs. Everybody thinks an entrepreneur is a swashbuckling risk taker, but a good entrepreneur reduces as much risk as possible, just like a good gambler. Like I mentioned with the horse racing, you could just go up to the window and bet on a horse, or you can load in 40 years of data about racing and write software to make the best probable bet in at the track, and that's how you've mitigated risk. So the best gamblers take risk out of the equation. The best investors and entrepreneurs take risk out of the equation.
That's fantastic. Look at that news you can use.
Yeah.
See?
I think it's, again, that's why I regret also not immediately taking what I learned from poker and applying it to other areas of my life. I should have immediately made the metaphor from poker and risk mitigation to other areas, and I didn't do it.
Well, you did it now.
No, I do it, yeah.
You're fine.
I try to.
I have one last drawback for gambling, and then I'm ready to make my final judgment. Gambling, I think, encourages corruption and cruelty. Maybe those are two separate issues, but they both start with C, so I thought I'd lump them together. But corruption, of course, in sports, because there's so much money at stake. The temptation is to throw the game. You had the Black Sox scandal in 1919, where the Chicago White Sox intentionally lost so that they could collect the money. And this is, the Supreme Court just ruled that states are allowed to legalize gambling on sports. So this is going to become huge. It's just sports gambling is going to get bigger and bigger, and the risk for corruption will get greater and greater.
Although, so corruption is bad and unethical. Like, let's say you're.
I want to hear you defend corruption. I'm excited.
So I'm going to defend it. But the problem with it is that, let's say you're betting on, I don't know, the New York Giants to win a game, and there's a great player on the New York Giants that everybody admires, and he's got a great record, and so on. And so that's why you're betting that the Giants are going to win this game. And let's say that great player, specifically throws the game so he could win millions of dollars on his own personal bet. That is obviously corrupt. But I don't think it should be illegal. I think if you're going to make gambling illegal, then part of understanding the risk that you're taking, like the government shouldn't protect you. If you're going to gamble, you're gambling. So the government shouldn't protect you. You're also making a bet that nobody's going to be corrupt on the other side. And so I have to say to myself, that guy is an admirable guy, and he doesn't want to ruin his Hall of Fame potential track record or winning, getting a better contract if his team wins the Super Bowl. And I'm betting that this team is not going to be corrupt. And
that is hilarious. It reminds me of, some people argue that performance-enhancing drugs should be legal. Like, why shouldn't? Are you on that side?
100%, because I think actually the fact that performance-enhancing drugs, so obviously this is related to the same issue. So I'll bet on somebody winning the Tour de France, and then it turns out, oh my gosh, Lance Armstrong took performance-enhancing drugs, and that ruins the whole thing. But here's the problem, is that everybody was saying nobody was taking performance-enhancing drugs. And so kids would spend their entire lives getting good at bicycle racing. They'd race in high school, they'd race in college. They're finally at that professional level. They're joining a team that's going to play in the Tour de France. And then guess what? They're approached by the team and said, listen, now we got to tell you the truth. Everybody on the team is taking performance-enhancing drugs. And since you devoted your entire life to this, you can't back out now. There's no other career for you. You're going to have to start taking these drugs that could hurt your health. But if you want to win, if you want to continue this career that you've worked 20 years at, you're going to have to start doing it also. And I think the fact
so start them juicing when they're like 11 or 12.
No, start being transparent so that kids and their parents can make the decisions about whether this is something they want to do with their lives. And that maybe there's innovations so that performance-enhancing drugs don't have as many side effects. And again, look, many things we do are performance-enhancing. The problem with the drugs are that they could have bad side effects, and that it's not transparent what's happening.
Right.
So if you legalize it, then it becomes transparent, then you know what you're up against, then you know what is involved in a career in this, then there's more research can be put into reducing the side effects, and gamblers and people backing different teams or institutions in sports could make more informed choices.
I am opposed to performance-enhancing drugs overall, but I'll give two arguments on your side. One, the sports are going to be just better to watch. I mean, can you imagine, like, if everyone who played baseball was juicing, like, the home runs would be out of the stadium. And number two, what was my second point? Number two, sports is all about skill, both mental and physical. So you have to be smart to know which drugs to take. Like, that is, like, you read about these people and they were balancing like 18
but they had
drugs.
they had medical help. I mean, they had great doctors helping.
Well, you have great trainers too. It's all about, you have to choose the.
But I think you need a third, which is a lot of kids love baseball, will spend their entire youth playing baseball, will go to play college baseball, and then the only thing that they're trained to do career-wise is to play pro baseball if they get the opportunity to get, I don't know, drafted or whatever into baseball. But then suddenly they realize their heroes were taking these performance-enhancing drugs, and and if they want to match the numbers of their heroes, they're going to have to start doing it too. But they didn't know that. So I think the lack of transparency, you can't have transparency if it's illegal, and so you have to make them legal to have transparency, and you need transparency so kids don't fool themselves. I think too many children are being hurt by the fact that performance-enhancing drugs used by their idols are illegal. So even if these drugs are bad and bad for the sport, they're worse for kids, the fact that it's illegal.
That's a whole other episode. I think we got to do an episode on performance-enhancing drugs. Well, the last point is, I said it encourages corruption and cruelty, and I really do think there's something about gambling that lowers our inhibitions, and we will gamble on just the worst thing. It brings out the worst in humanity. So for hundreds of years in England, every town had a bear baiting ring. Do you know what bear? No. It was a very popular. A bear was tied to a stake, and trained dogs were set upon it, and see who would kill the bear. Would the bear kill the dogs or the dog? And there were other variations, like a pony with an ape tied to its back, and then they'd set the dogs on the pony ape hybrid. It was freaking crazy. And that's just one example of many of, now we still have cockfighting and dog fighting. I think there's something about gambling that makes us want to bet on anything.
Yeah, I agree, particularly when in the addictive aspect of it. So yeah. But again, everything in life's a gamble, taking the broadest possible definition of gambling. So at some point there's a line.
Right. I mean, I wonder if it's like, assault weapons, we've got to ban some forms of gambling and allow others. Like, I would never want to gamble poker. I mean, I would never want to forbid poker, because I think it's an interesting game. It teaches you a lot of life skills. What does sitting at a slot machine in a stupor teach you? Nothing. That's just like literally a drug that is going to suck out your soul and suck out your money.
Yeah, and it is kind of a regressive tax also against people. So you, in your case, in what you're saying, is you would gamble anything where over time the odds are on the side of the house as opposed to the individual.
Yeah, definitely. I think
like there's no way to mitigate the risk enough with a slot machine that you have a chance of winning in the long run.
Well, what if it's the casinos are like, you pay $5 to get in, and that's how they make their money. And once you're in, you get to keep whatever you win. And there's no house. The house does not get any advantage.
Yeah, but then all the casinos will go out of business.
But if it's 50-50 overall, they would be okay.
They cost so much to make and to maintain. Like, think of a normal skyscraper, and then think of, like, I don't know, the MGM Grand Casino in Las Vegas. It's such a more there's shows. They spend tens of millions on shows that are free.
Right.
The alcohol is all free.
All right. You're right.
Now they can start charging for those things, but all these things are just less fun. They're going to have less patrons. and
Right.
particularly once they start charging, and their whole business model goes away, like Las Vegas goes away, which maybe that's what we're suggesting, but and it's already kind of going away because of online gambling. That's the thing too, is gambling's moved online and offshore.
Yeah. I don't know the solution. It's an interesting one. I would say, some forms should be legal and some forms should be illegal.
I think people should learn their own capabilities of addiction and learn the elements of gambling so the bad sides don't take advantage of them, and then learn how to take those skills and apply them to more productive things. I don't think any rules will work because people will continue gambling. It's like a natural thing in our brain to want to gamble and having skin in the game.
Maybe. Well, we'll put it on a prediction market and see what happens. We'll see.
Gambling, good or bad?
Yeah.
Prediction market.
Will gambling be illegal in 50 years? Let's put that on the prediction market.
All right.
Excellent. Thank you, James.
Thank you, AJ. See you next time.
See you next
And if you have any comments about gambling or any ideas for topics for good or bad, tweet us at GOBpod on a little-known website called Twitter.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.